Welcome to Ask Asbury. My name is Dr. Sue Paul, and it's August, which is Heat Safety Awareness Month. And with us today is Shelley Mullenix. Shelley is the Senior Associate Athletic Director for Health and Wellness at LSU. Shelley, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Cool. So can you tell us about your background and what you do for a living?
Yes, I actually wear a number of hats. Most recent hat, as you mentioned, was an athletic director here at LSU, overseeing all the health and wellness aspects of student athlete experience to Division I college university. So that's quite a challenge. But from a credentialing standpoint, I'm an athletic trainer, so certified athletic trainer for the last close to 30 years. Started at Florida State University as a student, as an undergrad, a master's student, and my first job. And then came to LSU to work with the football program as an athletic trainer as well. Along the timeline, I have found the counseling part of my job to be pretty rewarding. And so in 2019, I had graduated here with a second master's in social work counseling. So I currently have two credentials right now. Athletic training is one, and then LCSW is the other.
Oh, that's amazing. So you've been working with D1 athletes in the heat for a long time, given Florida and Louisiana being your home bases and working with those football players out in the heat. So you must know a thing or two about heat safety.
Yes, yeah, we have quite the challenge when we talk about obviously keeping the athletes cool. One thing that is an added issue for us, and it would be for anyone who's really working outside, is for us, the uniforms that they're wearing. I mean, it's basically 40 pounds of soaking wet pads on top of their body weight in the heat. And here, we kindly refer to our area as the Serengeti. It's super hot and it's a really challenging environment, I think, to get the most out of someone.
Yeah, super swampy, I bet too.
It's very humid. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. All right, well, you have such an interesting background, and I think you can give us a lot of good tips about how to stay safe in the heat. But what are some of the early warning signs of like heat exhaustion or heat stroke or those sort of things?
Well, the literature really talks about kind of four general phases, and you don't necessarily have to go through all four of these phases to end up in a heat stroke situation, but depending on the situation of where you are, participating, if you're outside, even if you're inside in a hot gym, you might experience one of these kind of four things. But essentially a heat rash would be the really first sign that we might see. And people tend to experience that. They would know they have that. It's kind of the prickly heat, those bumps that are on the back of your arm. That sometimes, and the flush red face is something that we look for when it's just kind of the early warning signs of heat rash. The next phase for us is pretty critical because this is kind of the point at which it tips to the other side, but heat cramps. So again, people are probably have experienced, the calf cramps in the middle of the night, cramping while you're actually participating, maybe in your abdominal region, usually stemming from loss of hydration, so dehydration status at that point. It continues on, and if you don't treat that, can progress to heat exhaustion. Basically just overheated, red face, cold, clammy skin, profuse sweating, dizziness, fatigue, very obvious that there's something going on. I would add in that spot though, if you're well conditioned, I have seen a number of athletes really kind of push through that phase in the spirit of, I guess, no pain, no gain, or wanting to keep their position on the field. But it is, that's a pretty critical time period. And then worst case scenario would be the heat stroke. And, you've got a core temperature at that point in the 104, 5, and 6. You're unable to cool yourself down, probably working out in the heat where you have a lot of humidity also, so you're not able to dissipate that heat. And it's obviously a life-threatening situation at that point.
Wow, it sounds so scary.
Yeah, it happens pretty quickly sometimes. So, especially when you're in extreme temperatures like we have here.
So why are older adults more vulnerable to heat-related illnesses?
Yeah, well, and great question. We actually see some of those same reasons. So I'll give you the ones that relate both to older folks and also to our athletes. The number one thing I think about is medications. And so medications do really end up creating a scenario where either your metabolism is running extra high. So in a situation like an ADHD diagnosis where someone might be on stimulants, you could have ADHD at 60, 70, 80 years old too. So if someone is on stimulants, that can also predispose them to a situation where they might be more dehydrated or dehydrated quicker because of the metabolic rate that puts your body in. And so that's the one thing that I really think about first and foremost. But I think that I think from a medication standpoint, we also see things like diuretics. So that would be something that you would see in the older population. You could still see that in our population here. For certain diagnoses, we might be using those, but generally speaking, diuretics would obviously cause you to be dehydrated a lot quicker. And so that ends up being a concern for us as well. There's also like certain diseases that I think also feed into the issues that are related to being able to regulate your core body temperature. Diabetes is one of those. So again, we see diabetes, unfortunately, at the age of, collegiate athletics, the 18 to 22s are starting to see that early onset.
Wow.
But certainly in the older population, you're going to have a lot of people with diabetes, and that also affects that. Multiple sclerosis is another illness disorder that can cause some problems with just being able to not properly regulate your body core temp.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And just not being very heat tolerant. I mean, I would think that if you are older person who spends a lot of time out in the heat, you might be more accustomed to it and can handle that fluctuation. Maybe an older person living in Louisiana versus an older person that lives up in the Northeast, maybe who doesn't have the degree of heat that we have here. So also just being acclimatized to it. So people, if you're not acclimatized to that kind of heat and you're in a heat wave, someone who would normally be able to tolerate the heat just can't tolerate it.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So that really matters, huh? Like what you're used to. And
100%.
yeah,
We
it's
worry
interesting.
about when we bring people here, new athletes, new staff. We think about older individuals too, our coaches. If we're bringing in coaches that are coming from different parts of the country that are not used to this kind of heat, I think right off the top of my hat, like a coach from Minnesota that would come down here. It's a major effort to get them acclimatized, and it takes time. It does not happen in one day.
Wow. Gosh, I didn't even think of that. Well, we still want our older friends to get outside. We don't want them to avoid the outdoors altogether. So is there a safe way for people to spend time outside, especially people who enjoy gardening or they just want to go for a walk? We don't want everybody staying indoors all the time.
Correct.
What's the safe way to do that?
Yeah. So again, just kind of leaning on the experience I've had here, when we know that the heat's going to be particularly bad on a given day, and obviously we rely on our forecasters for that. Maybe going out earlier in the day or later at night might be. So avoiding that, that 10 o'clock a.m. to 3 or 4 p.m. here, because the heat lasts pretty much all day, might be a better option. So adjusting the time in which you partake in those activities, I think, is super important. You really would want to avoid the middle of the day heat. I mean, if you can, for sure. So that would be one thing you can do. I think dressing the part is important. So you wouldn't want to go out in, something that is going to be heavy, that's not moisture wicking. So they have certain materials in your clothes now. Dry fit material, is something that's pretty common. That is a product from Nike back in the day, but lots of companies make a dry fit material that pulls that sweat off your skin, that allows your skin to then sweat and cool off. So I think that probably is an important thing. And I'll say, with my own experience with my own mother, who loves to be outside, to just be out there kind of, piddling in the garden and sweeping and stuff. She also likes to wear long sleeves. So, that's something to think about. You can be in a shorter sleeve shirt, that would be ideal. But if you're in long sleeves, it's really critical that you think about the material and that you also think about the color of the clothing. Anecdotally, we've done a lot of experiments here on the field where we have our offense who would be in purple and our offense in white and our defense in purple. And we'll use a laser infrared measuring tool to see the difference. And almost always is going to be 10 degrees hotter for those that are in purple,
Wow.
which is significant. If you're already talking
Yes.
about heat that's 85 degrees, right? You're talking about the 95 degrees. So lighter color clothing is super important to think about as well. So, we're not going to worry so much about fashion. We're going to go with what's functional, and the lighter color clothing is super important. I think
Yeah.
the other thing that's worth mentioning and seems to be obvious is making sure you're hydrated. And there's,
That was my next question for you
yeah,
about hydration.
yeah, and two
Yeah.
things I worry about a little bit again with older folks. There are disorders where you can't actually have too much fluids. There might be people that have fluid restriction as part of their diagnosis that they have for a disorder. And those are particularly tricky because you still need to be hydrated and you're still sweating. So you still need to be able to consume the fluids. So there's going to have to be a balance, obviously a conversation with their physician to figure out what is that sweet spot of maintaining their limitations to fluid that they can take and also being able to be out in the heat. But hydrating is super important. And then what you're hydrating with is a whole nother topic.
Okay, let me ask you about this specifically because a lot of people don't understand
Yeah.
what the benefits and, okay. So Shelly, here's your question. When you're trying to stay hydrated for hot outside activity, should you drink water? Should you drink some sort of fluid with electrolytes in it? Should you drink something sugary and sweet? What would be the best fluid to hydrate with?
Yeah, so great question. And again, not a straightforward answer that I can give you because water would be the most straightforward answer I can give you. What we see in those individuals who are partaking in strenuous exercise outside, you automatically through your sweat are going to lose a lot of minerals, whether it's sodium, potassium, magnesium, all those things are critical to the balance of the way your heart actually works and also how you dissipate your heat. And so water would be the most obvious. And obviously water with ice, if we're talking about super hot, water that's cool enough. If you can't drink it when it's ice cold, then at least something that's not warm and cooler than tap water. But if you only hydrate with water, what you're going to find is you're going to flush out all your electrolytes. So even in a good scenario where you're not excessively sweating in heat, you still are going to be flushing out a lot of your electrolytes if you're only consuming water. So you do want to mix it up a little bit. And here in the athletic population in our setting, specialized drinks that are made for that work well, whether it's just, an electrolyte drink, Gatorade, Powerade, that type of stuff, or something that's more sodium based, like a My High. There's lots of things that you can buy that will actually help enhance the sodium and sodium intake, potassium intake, that sort of thing. So the real answer is probably a mix of water and electrolyte drinks. Things you should avoid, which I think is also worth talking about, would be caffeinated drinks. So caffeinated drinks dehydrate you. So if you're used to having your morning coffee and your morning tea, what general rule of thumb that I say is you should always drink equal amounts of water to offset that, or equal amounts of Powerade to offset that drink that you've already had in the morning to get yourself back to equilibrium, right? Because if you're drinking coffee or drinking energy drinks or you're drinking tea, whatever it is that's caffeinated, it's actually dehydrating you. It's not hydrating. It's doing the opposite of what you want it to do. So making sure that you're not consuming just those types of drinks is super important. And then I think the one that no one really wants to talk about is alcohol. So when it gets to be nice, we're just July 4th, obviously right around the corner here. People might be outside barbecuing, doing the things that you do at picnics. And if it involves drinking a beer or wine or whatever, those things dehydrate you. So to be out in the heat, whether you're relaxing by your pool or whatever, being out in the heat with alcohol is a major source of dehydration. And so you have to be able to supplement that back with water or electrolyte drinks in order to get yourself back to equilibrium. If you're doing extra activity, you need to ramp up the quantity because it's just not going to be enough. You don't realize how much you lose in your sweat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is such great advice. So for those water drinkers out there, don't be bashful. You don't need to be an athlete to grab the Gatorade or the Powerade and use that as, something to quench your thirst when you're sweating a lot. It's important.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And they make products that are in, powder little sleeves that you can slide into your water.
Uh-huh.
If you don't want the added, dyes that come with the drinks that you perceive as electrolyte drinks, there's lots of things that you can add that are, colorless, really even tasteless, that add that those minerals back in.
Yeah, it's really important. That's great advice, Shelley.
Yeah.
All right, last question. Do you have any, are there any myths you want to dispel or misconceptions about heat? I have one, but I'll let you go first.
Well, I can give you just an anecdotal experience that I've had that always sticks out in my head because it was really the difference between someone that was in a heat exhaustion state and then a heat stroke state.
Okay.
It's not enough just to remove yourself from the environment. So if you are, envision yourself as, again, one of these athletes that's, got a lot of clothing on, a lot of pads and that sort of thing, a helmet on that's not allowing the heat to dissipate from your head, which is a great place for the heat to go, is out through the head. To move yourself just into an area where you're out of the sun and then lay down because you're exhausted and then stay there is not good because you're still cooking in your clothing, right? So think of yourself as a turkey in the oven. Just because you've, turned the oven off, it's still in the oven and it still cooks. So making sure that you actually are taking those clothing items off that are either soaking wet at this point or that are bulky or heavy or whatever is super important because it's just holding in that heat. It's literally, the stuffing on the outside that's holding the heat in. And so don't think that just moving in is enough. So you move inside, you do a cold compress, you take off those wet clothes, you might add ice to the back of your neck, dunk your hands in an ice cold bath, things like that that could help actually speed up the process so that you don't continue to kind of cook. Yeah.
Well, that's great advice, honestly.
Yeah.
It's not a misconception exactly, but fun fact that Shelley and I are both from South Florida, originally. We were born and raised in the heat and humidity, so we are pretty well heat acclimated.
Yes.
We do pretty well in the heat. So when I moved up north, I realized that a lot of people just avoid sweating. Like they think it's bad for them, or they think, oh my gosh, I'm so hot, I'm sweating. Well, that's the whole idea, so it's okay to get hot. It's okay to sweat, and it's okay to exert yourself in the heat. You just have to do it safely, in a safe way.
For sure. Well, it's more of a concern if you're not sweating. So if you're not sweating, then your body's it's not allowing the heat to escape, right? So the act of actually sweating is essential to cool your body. So you would want to sweat. That would be a sign that your body's actually working well.
That's exactly right. So it's okay to feel heat. It's a good thing to feel sweat, so stop preventing even that those mechanics from taking place because it's important, and just so if you're not necessarily comfortable with heat, just get comfortable with sweat because it's good.
Absolutely.
Good for you.
The other thing that people can do too is take a break, right? You can go outside if you want to go outside every hour because you want to move your legs every hour. You can go out every hour. Maybe you just make those visits outside for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, come back in, allow your body to cool back off again, and you can go back out again. So it's not like an all or none thing. Like you can only sweat one time or you can only go out one time during the day. You can go out as often as you want. You want to look at the time that you're going out. Try to make it not a time where you've got excessive heat going on. But just allow yourself the time to cool back off and go back in. Your body will reset itself and then it can actually, return back out there for another bout of activity.
Right. So we don't want to discourage people from going out in the heat. It's okay. Just do it safely.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Okay. Absolutely.
Well, Shelley, thank you so much for being here today. This was really interesting. And I think it's going to give our viewers a lot of good tips on how to stay safe in the heat.
Great. Well, I hope it helps.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.